Peer review is also known as peer partnerships or peer mentoring. Some universities refer to peer-assisted teaching, and at CQ University we talk about academic peer support. All of these approaches share some common characteristics. First of all, they all focus on the scholarship of learning and teaching by facilitating learning opportunities which involve both personal reflective practice and engagement of the academic community through peer review. Now, central to this Boyer approach to the scholarship of learning and teaching is the view that the development of academic staff occurs in real contexts, such as the classroom, the lecture theatre, or an online learning and teaching environment, with support provided in real time with the involvement of other academic staff. One of the key areas in this notion of the scholarship of learning and teaching is that of the learning community, the recognition of the value of relationships and practices that occur in and throughout the work practices of staff. And within this context, peers play a really important role in a non-hierarchical relationship and providing leadership and training, which is central to the development of expertise. So what are some of the benefits of these peer review or peer partnerships? First of all, it's a reciprocal relationship. That is, both reviewer and reviewee benefit from being members of the same learning community. It provides an opportunity for academics to engage in reflection and reflective practice in a non-hierarchical and non-evaluative peer relationship. And as Phil Ray suggests, the best staff development might be just sitting in a lot of other classes, learning from what works and what doesn't. Students, of course, benefit from continuous curriculum improvement process, which can be facilitated through these peer partnerships. And peer review provides evidence to support applications for promotion and learning and teaching awards, both internal but also national learning and teaching awards such as the OLT citations or awards. So there's been several models that have been developed over the last decade. A large number were funded by the Australian Learning and Teaching Council back around 2007, and these included a project led by Professor Geoffrey Crisp, who at that time was at the University of Adelaide, focusing on peer review of teaching for promotion purposes. I led a project when I was at UniSA focusing on peer review of online learning and teaching. Kerry Lee Harris at University of Melbourne led a project which resulted in the development of a handbook on peer review of teaching in higher education. Joe McKenzie at UTS developed a strategy for embedding peer review of learning and teaching in blended learning environments. And more recently, Angela from Monash led a fellowship focusing on peer-assisted teaching scheme. And we've, in fact, at CQ University, modelled our practices on that peer-assisted teaching scheme. So how does that get played out in a university context? Well, RMIT have embedded peer review as an overarching strategy within their learning and teaching framework. And there are two separate but very complementary components that serve different purposes. So one aspect of this program is referred to as peer partnerships, and that's a voluntary process whereby staff are encouraged to take up a reflective approach to their teaching practice for developmental purposes. And so through a process of peer exchange, staff can learn about teaching and will work towards enhancing the quality of their teaching practice. And RMIT cites research that says this participation builds relationships, enhances confidence, and can impact positively on students' perception of teaching. And here you see the model that they've developed, which you can see is a kind of iterative cycle involving 4 recurring stages of focus, observe, reflect, set goals, implement, and evaluate. Complementing peer partnerships, RMIT also has a much more structured approach called peer review of teaching, which is designed to provide evidence of good teaching practice for inclusion in applications for individual teaching awards and or academic promotion. So I talked about the PAT scheme, Peer Assisted Teaching Scheme, and this provides a structured framework for ongoing improvement of teaching and learning practice with input, assistance and guidance from faculty teaching leaders. Notice that the process begins with 2 academics from the same faculty voluntarily being paired together, one taking the role of mentor and the other as mentee. The partnerships meet to discuss and share ideas on how to improve the unit requiring critical attention, and these meetings take place typically over coffee. University of South Australia has adopted a similar voluntary scheme, and as I said, this is the sort of approach CQ University takes. And here you can see the framework which outlines the various stages over a semester during which the peer partnerships relationships develop. So I talked about PATS as kind of being one of the foundations for our approach at CQ University. You'll find on the Learning and Teaching website a number of resources to support peer support or peer partnerships. One is the 10 quick tips for supporting the approach. Start small, decide what aspects of your practice you'd like to work on, plan, look outside your discipline potentially for a peer, establish the rules, keep the relationship personal, but most importantly, keep the feedback positive and constructive, be open, supportive and collegial, value diversity, reflect on learning, plan for improvement, and do it regularly. So I mentioned several resources. You might like to check these out. Making the most of academic peer support, peer review, giving feedback and receiving feedback. And you will also find observation forms if you do want to participate in this program. And peer observation typically aligns with our learning and teaching strategy, which looks at all of these sorts of dimensions for evidence of engaged design, engaging delivery, effective student support, aligned and authentic assessment, timely and useful feedback, effective moderation, and evidence-based evaluation. So that sort of summarises the field of peer review, peer partnerships, peer mentoring relationships, and how we at CQ University provide that voluntary opportunity for academics to participate in the program.